It's time for our first mailbag of the offseason. Up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in polka. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu,
Happy Kokomo Mailbag Friday, and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on February 6th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. Today on the show, our first mailbag of the offseason. We'll answer your Apple Podcast and email questions, and we've got some news to get to from the week. Honestly, Chris, happy Kokomo Mailbag Friday. It doesn't flow as great as it should, but I figured I'd try it out.
I think it's fine. I just I have no idea what day it is anymore. Because last week I was off Thursday and Friday. I had family in town. And then this week we transitioned to our in-season content schedule, basically, where we're working Sunday through Thursday. And I just have no idea what day it is. Like, you're saying it's Kokomo Friday. I asked you earlier today if it was Wednesday. I just have no, I'm completely lost. I will figure it out, but I am just a mess right now. It's been very stressful.
And it doesn't help that we are recording this one day in advance. So it is
right. Yeah.
It is factually, objectively not Friday right now. But
No.
When you're listening to this, it is Friday. And for anyone who watched or listened to our Framber Valdez emergency podcast, you will see Chris scrambling to know what day it is. I believe you said it's Tuesday, right? And I said, no, it's Wednesday. You're like, oh, all right, it's Tuesday. And I'm like, wait, what? So,
it's hard out here, man.
Yeah, it's a busy time. This is crunch time. This is draft prep central for fantasy baseball. Let's hit the news and notes from the week, and then we'll get to your mailbag questions. And first up, we actually just learned Tarik Skubal won his arbitration case and will make $32 million in 2026. This doesn't really affect his value, affect whether or not he's going to be traded. I don't believe. The Tigers filed at $19 million, so there was a discrepancy of $13 million in this arbitration case. Chris, I just find it LOL. Good for them. You should have to pay up Tarik Skubal.
I mean, you never know how arbitration's going to go, right? Like the arbitration system is not necessarily based on how we value players in the current marketplace, right? Like they're still talking about like wins and batting average and saves. Like that's still the most important thing in this marketplace. So like you never know how this is going to work out, but the record for a pitcher in arbitration, I'm pretty sure, was David Price back in 2016. He made $19.5 million. Now, that was slightly different because he was a Super 2 guy, so it was his fourth year of eligibility in arbitration. But 10 years ago, David Price got more than the Tigers offered Tarik Skubal, coming off of 2 Cy Young awards.
Yeah.
Like, I think if they had offered $23 million, they probably win. But there was just no way that the arbitration panel was going to say, oh yeah, he should get less than someone a decade ago. That's just, it didn't make any sense. I don't know what they were thinking on that offer. Good for Tarik Skubal. You want my Venmo? You got a little extra cash coming in. You know, if you want to hit a brother up.
Miguel Andujar signed a 1-year, $4 million deal with the Padres. He's turning 31 years old in March, coming off a solid season. Looked great with the Reds last year. Obviously, that was a great place to hit. San Diego, not as great, but Andujar hit .318, 10 homers, .822 OPS over 94 games. My guess is that Andujar will start at DH, Gavin Sheets at first base, Jake Cronenworth at second, with Sungmoon Song as their super utility player. Things can change, obviously. Chris, what do you think about Miguel Andujar headed to the Padres?
Yeah, I mean, I could see him ending up being in a platoon with Gavin Sheets at first base as well, but I don't know if they have enough viable options unless Sungmoon Song is just a lot better than people expect him to be. So, yeah, he'll probably play a decent amount. I don't have a lot of faith in Miguel Andujar. I think at best he's an average bat. Last year I know he was a little better than average. I don't really buy that, so unlikely to matter much for fantasy. He overperformed his expected stats by quite a bit in 2025. 354 WOBA, 296 xWOBA.
Yeah. I think the best thing Andujar has going for him is dual position eligibility, third base and outfield. And just a name for deeper leagues, I think 15-team mixed roto leagues, NL only for sure. But outside of that, I don't think that there's too much there with Andujar. And he kind of profiles better as a short side platoon bat at this point. Last year, his splits 986 OPS against lefties, 759 against righties. So perhaps eventually he does kind of just fall into that short side platoon role. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa signed a 1-year, $6 million deal with the Red Sox. $6 million, a little bit more than I thought I would get in this economy. But last year he hit 262, 2 homers, 15 steals across 138 games. He doesn't really matter much for fantasy. He's a super utility option. I think this offers the Red Sox some insurance at third base since Marcelo Meyer has just dealt with so many injuries in his career.
Yeah, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is a totally fine utility guy, but if he's starting a significant number of games for you, that's probably a problem. I guess the Red Sox are just rolling with this infield, with Romy Gonzalez as the projected starter at second base. And yeah, I think a team that's this close to contending, that just signed Ranger Suarez and has some glut in the rotation and in the outfield, should probably have been more aggressive in upgrading that second base spot. But in fairness, Marcelo Meyer could have a breakout season and cement the third base spot for them in the long term. Christian Campbell is still around as a very recent, highly touted prospect who is a primary second baseman who has positional flexibility as well. I understand the approach they're taking, even if I would personally prefer a little more certainty at multiple spots around the infield.
Yeah, the problem with Christian Campbell is the Red Sox have already said they want him to primarily focus on the outfield. So do they want him to play second base? I'm not so sure. I actually just yesterday recorded our Astros team preview. It's actually coming out today for those listening on Friday. And had Matthew Kawahara on. He covers the team for the Houston Chronicle. And, we just came to the conclusion, get Dana Brown, that would make more sense. Dana Brown and Craig Breslow in a room together. They cannot leave until they get a trade done because the Red Sox and Astros are just such a match made in heaven right now, right? The Astros need an outfielder. The Red Sox need an infielder. So Isaac Paredes and something for Jarren Duran or Willie Abreu. Like, it just makes so much sense. Let's get that done. And everyone's happy. But right now, there's obviously a cluster for both of those teams, the Red Sox and the Astros. Carlos Santana agreed to a 1-year, $2 million deal with the D-backs. He is turning 40 in April. Last year, hit 219, 11 homers, 7 steals in 124 games. His quality of contact fell off hard. He was bad against both lefties and righties, but in previous years, he was better against lefties. So I view this as a short side platoon, kind of veteran presence on the team for the D-backs. They kind of have a little bit of a glut of their own. I guess this will get figured out during spring training, Chris, but they have, for center field, left field, and DH, some combination of Jordan Lawler, Alec Thomas, Blaze Alexander, Ryan Waldschmidt, Adrian Del Castillo. So feels like a spring training battle for all those spots, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of those guys are pretty fringy. It might work out that they all just end up playing ahead of Jordan Lawler. And, we have some questions about how much the Diamondbacks actually like Jordan Lawler at this point. As far as these things go, though, there's a pretty wide open path for Jordan Lawler to force his way into it if he earns that job. I think that's what it comes down to. And I think he's by far the most interesting of these guys. I think we know what Alec Thomas is, and it's not particularly impressive. I think we know what Blaze Alexander is. I know he's had some stretches where he's looked better. I know he has a cool name, but I think he's probably not a particularly good Major League Baseball player. Jordan Lawler might be. And I think in the long run, hopefully he takes advantage of the opportunity that's clearly here, because I think the best version of this Diamondbacks team is one where Jordan Lawler transitions to the outfield smoothly and plays in the everyday lineup.
AJ Hinch indicated on Wednesday that Kenley Jansen will open the season as the team's closer. Here is the exact quote. I think they're all going to get saves. I think we can pretty much guess how it's going. It's going to be given that one of them has a historic number of saves. So Kenley Jansen will get the first save. I just thought it was interesting that he said they're all going to get saves. I mean, that could mean Kenley Jansen gets 25 of them and Kyle Finnegan gets 3 and Will Vest gets 3 and it's just Jansen's job. But I thought it was kind of an interesting quote, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, managers so rarely these days come out and just say, yeah, that guy's our closer. They like the flexibility that not having one set guy brings to the table. I think a lot of teams, rightly or wrongly, believe that playing coy with these things give them some kind of advantage over their competition, a competitive advantage. I think that's kind of silly, but I still think Kenley Jansen is the closer here. It's just, does that mean he gets 90% of the save opportunities? Probably not. But I would guess if he stays healthy and remains as effective as he's been lately, I would guess at least 25 saves.
Harry Ford is expected to compete with Keibert Ruiz for the starting catcher spot heading into the season. So we actually just did our catcher preview the other day, and we did bring up Harry Ford as a very deep sleeper. So something to pay attention to there in spring training. We did get some clarity on the Reds after the Eugenio Suarez signing. Sal Stewart is expected to split his time between DH and corner infield. Spencer Steer is expected to play some in the outfield and serve in a super utility role. So what that tells me, Chris, maybe I'm reading into this too much. It kind of feels like Sal Stewart is ahead of Spencer Steer just on the depth chart overall. When I hear Spencer Steer is a super utility type, but Sal Stewart is just like first base and DH, that makes me a little bit more comfortable and excited about Sal Stewart.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to go back to 2024 to find Spencer Steer playing left field, first base, second base, right field, and shortstop. He played one game of shortstop apparently that season. He played 42 games, started 42 games at third base in 2023. Last year and at the end of 2024, he was dealing with a shoulder injury that limited him to mostly first base or DH. If he's healthy and they think his arm is up to it, yeah, maybe he's just left field, right field, third base, second base, first base, DH, just depending on what the team needs in any given day. And Spencer Steer could just end up still being more or less an everyday player. And it's just, he's not an everyday player in one spot. I think that's probably pretty likely, but it is good to hear Sal Stewart kind of has his spots. And I just think, as I said after the Eugenio Suarez signing, I just think Sal Stewart's fantasy value is in his own hands. If he's as good as we think he is, I don't think it's going to matter. I think he's going to play. I just do not think the Reds have enough good players to keep Sal Stewart out of the lineup. Unless he's bad, in which case we don't care that he's not playing every day. So I don't have too many worries about Sal Stewart's playing time. I think it'll be there if he earns it. And if he earns it, you'll be thrilled with him.
White Sox reliever Grant Taylor has a goal of reaching 100 innings in 2026. The team will deploy Taylor as a reliever this season before transitioning him back into his starter role in 2027. So that sounds like maybe some multi-inning appearances here. You know, maybe he can get some kind of bulk relief at times. I still think Grant Taylor is very talented and probably going to be used in a high leverage role, but perhaps that could be, you know, over the 7th and 8th innings or things like that throughout the course of the season, if they want to get him to 100 innings like he's hoping for here in 2026. From a dynasty perspective, if you got Grant Taylor, I mean, if he's a starter in 2027, that's something to look forward to there as well. So pretty interesting name there is Grant Taylor. Before we hit the break, reminder to subscribe to the FBT newsletter. If you haven't already, cbssports.com/newsletters. You can sign up for free and like this video. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. We have so much content coming for the next 2 months as we gear up for opening day. I mean, we're going to be doing position previews, live mock drafts, mock draft mega stream, reacting to spring training, all that fun stuff. So make sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's take that first break. We'll be back right after this.
This isn't just combat. It's cinema.
Ready or not, here I come. Let's go! Are you not entertained?
The new home of UFC, Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball
Wait, Frank.
today.
Edit this out.
All right.
Or don't. You can leave it in.
Okay.
But I just noticed my lights flickering ahead of me,
Okay.
which is what happened right before we lost power a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So just a heads up, I have not lost power, but if it does happen, that might happen.
All right. Well,
I know that there was a nether fire a couple blocks away from me, and I've noticed some Con Ed construction happening. So hopefully we're okay, but I just wanted to give you a warning on that before we move on.
all right. I do appreciate it. Hope you don't lose power because it's still really, really cold outside, obviously. And look, I mean, you don't want anyone to lose power, but especially when it's really, really cold, obviously. So if that happens, we might have a solo mailbag here. So let's get to the questions, and we will start with the Apple Podcast review questions. And this one is from Bodybag6. How should your draft change for draft and hold leagues? Closers get pushed up a lot in those leagues, sometimes even into the late third round. Does your approach towards closers or just hitters and pitchers overall differ from a fab league? Do you target different types of players?
Yeah, I think as a general rule, you take fewer risks on playing time. I think you prioritize multi-positional eligibility, and because you're not going to have the opportunity to add guys throughout the season. You want to be able to have, if you have, 10 outfielders on your roster, having a couple of those guys with second or third base eligibility will help, just because you might have a week where 7 of your best players are outfielders, and you might lose that production if those guys don't have other eligibility. So I think that's the biggest one. And then this is a big part of what we talk about a lot when we talk about the NFBC ADP, which is those closers get pushed way, way up because there's such a priority on role certainty. And so the closers who have a certain role going into the season are going to get pushed way up just because you don't get to play the waiver wire. And so there are going to be a lot of dead saves in any given draft and hold league. Even a 50-team or a 50-round draft where you're drafting, it'd be 750 players in a 15-team league.
Yeah.
There will inevitably be a lot of closers, or at least guys who get 8 to 10 saves, who just don't get drafted in that format because they come out of nowhere. So I think that's why you see that marketplace the way it is on closers.
If you look at the NFBC Draft Champions ADP over the past month, these are 15-team draft and hold leagues. Some closers: Mason Miller, Edwin Diaz in the second round, Andres Munoz, Cade Smith, Yohan Duran, David Bednar, Devin Williams, Aroldis Chapman, all going in the third round on average. In the fourth round, you have Josh Hader. In the fifth round, you have Ryan Helsley, Raisel Iglesias, and then the first pick of the sixth round is Carlos Estevez. So there are many different ways to win in draft and hold. If you wait on closers, you really have to get lucky, obviously. Yeah. But there are stats, there's data to support that a lot of the best draft and hold players, they do pay up for saves. They do pay up for that certainty. So, me typically, I do play in a few draft and hold leagues, and I would like to get, for me, the cutoff is Raisel Iglesias. I would like to get at least one closer by that point. So that means using
top 10 guys,
one of your top 5 round picks on a closer, which is kind of foreign for some. I mean, it's not a comfortable place to be, but that is what the format calls for. And then I do like to jump in and get one of those second-tier closers, whether it's Fairbanks, Hoffman, Emilio Pagan. So, again, you're probably looking at 2 of your top 8 or 9 picks being closers, and it's not a place that you want to be. But typically, the best players in this format that I have seen before, they do usually pay up for saves and pay up for closers. So that's just my 2 cents. I think overall, from a roster construction view, you have 50 rounds. I like to get at least 10 outfielders on my team, 3 of each infield position, having guys with positional flexibility, as you pointed out, Chris. I think those guys are even more valuable. And I like hitters who have been more durable in the past. Guys like Matt Olson come to mind. He never misses a game.
Yeah.
Pete Alonso, guys like that. It's just high floor guys that are going to play every single day. I do put a little bit more emphasis on players like that. On the pitching side of things, you usually wind up with 22 or 23 total pitches of your 50 spots. And I would say 7 of those are probably relievers and the rest are starting pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
So, divvy that up, 2 lockdown closers, and then maybe you're just taking 5 reliever stabs throughout the course of the draft, probably later on in the draft for the most part.
But there is still value in a draft and hold to the non-closer relievers, as there is in any format. But there will be weeks where you have multiple starters getting bombed, and there will be weeks when you have relievers who get a save and a win, even though they're not a closer. And
so many injuries too.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times towards the end of the season, you have no starters left to put in your lineup. You might just have to put in a reliever just to stop the bleeding, right? So, somebody like the reliever on the Padres, who's really good, his name is escaping me right now. Sets up for Mason Miller.
Jeremiah Estrada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody like that, who's probably not going to get any single saves this year, maybe 1 or 2, but really good ratios, really good strikeouts. Somebody like
Could
that
win 8 games.
could have value in this format.
The other reliever on the Padres, he won 11 games last year, right? The pure reliever. Morejon.
Yeah.
He won 13 games last year.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. Yeah.
It was 8th in the league in wins.
Yeah. There are definitely names like that will have value. So I think you probably, if you draft 7 relievers, you probably want 2 lockdown closers. Maybe you mix in 1 or 2 just ratio guys, and then the other 3 you just want to be pure save speculation dart throws. That if everything goes perfectly for them, they wind up getting a couple saves this season. So very unique format, and you definitely do have to change the way that you think about drafting in that one. This one is from JMac NYG10. And I know people tell me, don't focus on the haters and stuff. I'll move very quickly through it. I don't care very much, but they left a 5-star review. So I will just read it and I will offer my opinion. That's it. Frank needs to focus on hosting and not pretending to be an analyst. It frequently sounds like he has to get his opinion out as his last word. Bring Azer back. So thank you for the 5-star rating. You're entitled to your opinion. I wish we could respond to reviews on the app, on the Apple Podcast app, kind of like you can on Google, but I can't. It's just not possible. So just for some clarity, I was hired to be a host analyst kind of hybrid here. So that's why I do it. But honestly, I give my opinion last a lot of times because I want you and Scott to give your opinion first. You guys have been on this podcast way before me. You're the foundation of this podcast. So I would imagine most people want to hear your opinions first. So that's why I usually kind of set it up that way. I don't set it up purposely thinking I'm going to get the final word so that they can't respond. It's just, I want to get my opinion in. You can't please everyone, Chris. And a lot of people actually say they want my opinion more. So I don't know exactly what to do there, but
I know you're not fishing for compliments here.
No.
I just want to say
everyone's entitled to their opinion.
I just want to say, 1, the only person pretending to be an analyst is me on this show.
No.
And 2, you do a phenomenal job. You are a great host. You are a great analyst. The job you do is incredibly difficult. And I know this because you leave 6 to 10 times a year, and the show is a barely on the rails disaster without you. So you are doing a phenomenal job.
You guys do a good job when I'm out. I listen to the podcast. You guys still do a good job. I will admit, and I will agree with one thing that you say, Adam Azer is the GOAT host. We could all agree on that. I was not a host before I came here. I was just an analyst. So I would think I'm at least okay at that. But anyway, let's get to your emails. fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. And this one is from Jesse. At one point in the first round of a 12-team league, would you draft a starting pitcher, either Skenes or Skubal? Not sure if format matters in your answer, but I play in both head-to-head points and head-to-head categories. So there's actually 4 questions here from Jesse. I included all of them. So what is your answer there, Chris? Skubal and Skenes, when is the earliest you would draft either of those guys?
Well, we have rankings. And my rankings say Tarik Skubal 11, Garrett Crochet 12, Paul Skenes 13. I think that this person didn't mention Garrett Crochet. Jesse didn't, but I think Crochet is right there with Skenes and Skubal. I think it's a top 3. I think you can put them in basically any order, and I would have zero complaints about it. And, you know, I have them starting at 11, but if you really want a pitcher, I don't have a problem taking them ahead of Corbin Carroll or Kyle Tucker, the 2 guys ahead of them, even Ellie De La Cruz. I think there's a little bit of a drop-off there, but you just look at the auction values that I have on the site. I've got Julio Rodriguez at 40, Carroll at 39, Tucker at 39, and then the 3 starting pitchers are $38 players. So there is very little distinction between the number 8 and number 13 spots in my rankings. I think as early as 8 is defensible. And I think it's any of those 3.
I think as early as 6. I have Skubal as my 6th ranked player overall. If you wanted to take Carroll or Tucker or
I think
Ellie,
I'm a little higher on Acuna and Ellie than you are.
Yeah. And then I have Crochet and Skenes a little bit lower in the first round. But yeah, for me, it's as high as 6. I would be willing to go on Tarik Skubal this season. What do you recommend for mock drafting? I have been using Fantasy Pros, free Draft Wizard, any other ideas. I find the ESPN and Yahoo rooms to be a waste of time because people either leave in the 3rd round or make unserious selections, i.e. closers. It is a tough question, Chris. I mean, there's no perfect answer. I mean, I believe we have mock drafts on CBS, so you can kind of do those as well. But you're probably drafting against computers in a lot of them as well. So, I would say maybe do like a best ball draft, a cheap one, like $10 best ball draft. At least, you know, people are paying a little bit of money, so you know they care about it. But that's not completely reflective of home leagues either. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the best thing you can do is to try to avoid leagues or mock drafts that have no league attached to them. 1, it's just going to be hard for them to fill. 2, you don't know how seriously people are going to play them. Whereas, if you're doing, one of those sleeper underdog drafts, if you're in one of the jurisdictions where that's allowed, I think that makes a lot of sense. Not underdog, sleeper, right? No, underdog. Sleeper doesn't have it. Underdog does.
Yes, underdog.
So one of those underdog drafts, the cheapest one, but that requires money, and I know that's not a viable option for everyone. And that's the hard thing about this question is if you're not going to spend money to play any league that's going to matter in some way, even a small way, it's going to be hard to get a good mock draft going. We can do that when we do our weekly or soon twice a week mock drafts because we're mostly bringing in people who work in the industry, who are analysts, and so that is I think there's just an inherent taking it seriously that a lot of people do there, even if we know the league's not going to get played out and people are going to take a few more chances as a result of that. I will say, follow Scott on X, the Everything app, because he's occasionally looking for people. I know for the mock draft we did last night, right? That was Tuesday.
Wednesday night.
That he was looking for a couple of people to fill out that draft. So you can have your opportunity there as well. So keep an eye on that. But yeah, it's hard to find really useful mock drafts for leagues that aren't going to be played out. It's kind of the reality of the situation. Although, jump in the live chat during our podcast. If you can, maybe put an extra cup of coffee on in the evening and stay up with us at midnight when we record, because we have a very active chat community on the YouTube channel. People in the comments are always talking about filling out leagues or, doing mock drafts with each other. There's a handful of people I always see in there, Jordan, Uncle Ted, all those guys. So, that might be a way to go. Or the fantasy baseball Reddit community is a great place to meet other people who talk about fantasy sports, and you might be able to get 11 people who are as obsessed with this sport as we are to do some drafts with you.
Yeah, we also have a FBT Facebook group. So, and there's there's over 10,000 people in there. Yep. So you could just kind of start a thread there and try and set up a mock draft there if you want as well.
And all those, I would say, if you're looking for a new league to join as well, that's everything on the Fantasy Baseball Today Facebook group, everything on the Fantasy Baseball Reddit is talking about finding leagues right now, or people are looking for people to join their leagues. So that there's, I would suggest any of those resources for sure.
A little PSA on joining a community and trying to find a league. Do not send money to anybody that you do not know.
Yes.
Look, it sounds like an obvious thing, but this happens more than you think,
Yeah.
and people get scammed and things like that. And so, obviously, it's not what you want, but it does happen. So just be careful.
I've been in industry leagues where people have stolen money before.
Oh gosh, I guess we'll have to talk about that off air. What team should be in line to have strong offenses that might be worth targeting? So, look, the obvious ones come to mind: the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets.
Jays.
The Blue Jays should be very good.
Red Sox.
I think the Athletics are going to be sneaky
I think
good.
I've said this a few times, but I think there's a chance that like an informal A's stack could be one of the most profitable things you can do in fantasy baseball in 2026.
I think the Orioles are sneaky too, man.
Yeah.
Bringing in Pete Alonso, trading for Taylor Ward, hopefully a healthy Gunnar Henderson. We'll see what we get out of Adley Rutschman, but that seems to be really good.
I think the Orioles and the Diamondbacks jump out as potentially undervalued ones, because the Diamondbacks had their big sell-off at the end of last season. That lineup was still really tough, despite, like, it's kind of a testament to how outrageously good Geraldo Perdomo and Ketel Marte were at the end of last season, that was still not an easy out, despite losing Josh Naylor and losing Eugenio Suarez and playing a bunch of guys every day who maybe didn't deserve it. So that's I think the Diamondbacks are a sneaky good one. It's a good place to hit. I think the Royals potentially. You know, I don't know if that's going to be like a top 5 offense, but moving the fences in a little bit, I think they've got some guys who could take another step forward. Obviously, we all love Carter Jensen, a name we haven't mentioned at all this offseason. And frankly, I don't know when we're going to, because outfield is so deep, but Jack Caglione. You know, you rewind the clock back about 8 months, and Jack Caglione versus Nick Kurtz was a legitimate argument, and a lot of prospect people had Jack Caglione ahead of Nick Kurtz. So obviously you take Nick Kurtz ahead of him, but Jack Caglione is still a premier prospect, premier athlete who, you know, if him and Jensen have breakout seasons, and Isaac Collins could be decent, the Royals could be a sneaky good offense that, you know, for the purposes of this, just kind of, because it's not just who are the best offenses, but who provide a lot of potential for profit. And I think the Royals could be one of them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who still like Jack Caglione too. I remember out at First Pitch Arizona, Eno Saris was talking him up in a kind of Junior Caminero-y type way, where Caglione is someone who's aggressive. He does chase pitches out of the zone, but he also makes a lot of contact, makes a lot of in-zone contact.
Premium bat speed.
Has a lot of raw power there as well. So, yeah, Caglione's a good call there. I will just mention the Astros, too. I mean, if they can find a way to stay healthy and get Paredes in the lineup, I mean, they're top 6. Pena, Alvarez, Altuve, Correa, Walker, Paredes in some order.
That's awesome.
That could be a pretty damn good lineup.
Yep.
Last question here from Jesse. Aside from Casey adjusting the dimensions of Kauffman and Tampa Bay moving back to the Trop, are there any other stadium changes for 2026?
You know, I want to circle back to the Astros before I answer this question too, because like Zach Cole is a pretty interesting prospect. I think people are genuinely sleeping on Cam Smith. Like, let's not forget this guy was a pretty premium prospect a year ago.
There was a report the other day that he's going to play center field.
Yeah, they're going to try him out in center field this spring. They seem pretty optimistic about his potential there, but like,
I didn't even mention Yainer Diaz, who was, you know, a top 70 pick last year.
Yeah, but Cam Smith was one of the best prospects in baseball this time a year ago, made the leap basically from A-ball to the majors. I know he wasn't great, but the ex-Woba was a little better than what he actually managed. I think there's plenty of room for Cam Smith in that same like Jack Caglione way, where people have just kind of forgotten about how excited we were about him. Now to get to the other question about stadium changes, I think Kansas City adjusting the walls at Kauffman Stadium to bring them in about 8 to 10 feet across most of the outfield and lowering them, I think, from 12 to 9 feet or 9 to 8, something like that. And then the Rays moving back to Tropicana Field are the only two changes that I could find. It's possible there's some kind of, like remember before the 2024 season, the Guardians changed the location of like concession stands in right field that created a wind tunnel effect. So there could be something like that that made their park play way better for left-handed hitters. But we won't know until that actually happens, I think.
So just earlier we were talking about the D-backs logjam and trying to figure out what happens there. There was just a trade that sent Blaze Alexander to the Orioles for Cage Stroud. So Blaze Alexander, I'm looking at the Orioles roster, probably profiles as kind of a bench utility role there. But it does free up another spot for the D-backs. So now we're talking about center field, left field, DH for Alec Thomas, Jordan Lawler, Ryan Waldschmidt, Adrian Del Castillo. So there's one name out of the mix for the D-backs. So
that's seemingly good news for Jordan Lawler, at least.
Let's take our final break. When we return, we'll get into more of your email questions right after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Happy Kokomo Mailbag Friday to all of you listening. And a reminder to send in your emails, fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. That's the letter I. And this next one is from Nate. I heard you reference Harrison Bader to the Giants can help improve their outfield defense. Can you guys take some time and talk about what teams have a good defense and what teams don't have a good defense and how it can affect the pitcher? Do you factor that in your rankings if two pitchers are similarly ranked and one has a better defense than the other? I think that's the perfect way to look at it, Chris. I don't want to overreact to it. I think it matters more for pitchers who rely on getting ground balls and put balls in play a little bit more. But more than anything, it's just when you're splitting hairs, you need some kind of deciding factor between one pitcher and another. I might lean on that other pitcher just because he has a better defense behind him. It's not a fundamental thing that I think changes my outlook too much on a starting pitcher.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is the Mackenzie Gore trade. He goes from a truly awful Washington Nationals defense to what figures to be a pretty good Texas defense. I think they probably got worse this offseason, losing Marcus Semien, putting Brandon Nimmo in the outfield. I don't know. I know Wyatt Langford rated out very well defensively last season, but I don't know if making him full-time center fielder is going to be great. So it may not be as big of an impact or improvement for Mackenzie Gore as last year's numbers would make you think. But I think that's a good example of what you're kind of looking for. I think the Cubs are kind of the best example of this right now, where we saw so much success from relatively low strikeout guys over the past couple of seasons. Justin Steele, Cade Horton was amazing last season, Matthew Boyd. That helps because they've just got an outrageously good infield, especially. I think their outfield, Piker Armstrong covers a lot of ground, but it's a little shaky. Oh, I guess Ian Happ is a Gold Glover out in left field too.
Yeah, he's good.
So that should be a very good defense. Toronto rated out as an exceptionally good defense last season. I think they should continue to be one. Dalton Varsho is an elite center fielder as well. Boston should be very good pretty much across the board. I think Milwaukee will continue to be good. We talked about this, and I think the Mets are going to have a really good defense. I think it kind of depends on Francisco Lindor and how, if there's any lingering effects of the elbow surgery they had this offseason, but the combination of him and Marcus Semien at second base, I think Bo Bichette should handle third base well, and I think their outfield defense should be pretty good with Luis Robert and Carson Benj taking over there. So I think the Mets should have a pretty good defense. I think on the other end, the White Sox are probably going to be pretty bad, losing Luis Robert. The Nationals, I don't see any reason that's going to be any good. The Angels were by far the worst defense in baseball last season.
Very bad.
Did the Angels add anyone that I guess Josh Lowe could be an upgrade in right field, but like they're going to be starting right now. It looks like Jorge Soler, Joe Adell, and Josh Lowe in the outfield.
Oh,
That's
there has been
really
some
bad.
talks about Mike Trout wanting to play center field.
Yeah, he's probably better than Joe Adell at this point in his career still.
Yeah.
Neto is not a great defensive shortstop. Yohan Moncada is probably not a great defensive third baseman. So
I guess the news there is that we're not drafting too many Angels pitchers.
Yeah, but you know there is some bounce back hope for Reed Detmers and Grayson Rodriguez as very, very late targets.
Yep.
It's going to be an uphill climb for that to happen with that team around them.
And I will just mention with the Giants too that yes, Bader helps their outfield defense, but we spoke about this after Luis Ariz signed. I think the left side of their infield defense is going to be amazing.
Might be the best in baseball.
Chapman, but the right side, for ground ball pitchers, Ariz, Devers, Eldridge.
And Bader's 32. His defense has slipped a little bit. I don't know if he's a great defensive center fielder,
but he was also playing a lot in left field. So.
But I think that's probably just an upgrade for Jung-Hoo Lee not playing center field.
Yep, for sure.
So I think the Giants should be pretty good, but there are definitely some questions there.
This one is from Charles. Strategy and quasi-keeper question. In a league where keepers are kept with a premium, like 2-round penalty from last year's draft or $2 cost added to the salary cap, do you choose the best value or the highest quality player? For example, and the players mentioned are just for example purposes. Not so sure I believe you. If you have Hunter Goodman in round 10, but he'll cost round 8 or drafted at $8 and you have to keep at $10 versus Michael Bush in round 20, you keep him for round 18 or drafted at $1 and you keep for $3. Goodman is the better player, but Bush is the better value. So this is very circumstantial, case-by-case basis.
Yeah. I
don't know that there is ever a flat-out right answer to a question like this, but which way do you lean?
I think when it comes down to elite players, getting any kind of discount on an elite player is always going to be more valuable just because those are the guys who are way harder to replace. So if you've got Juan Soto for $32 and you think he's a $43 player, that is probably preferable to an $11 player who you have for $1, even though the gap is probably very similar, if not weighed in the lower price players at advantage, but you can probably replace the $11 player.
Yeah.
There is no replacing Juan Soto at any price. So that is the highest level way you can look at it is prioritize better players and those few players who are truly irreplaceable, even if you get less of a discount. After that, it's a case-by-case basis. And the Goodman for $10 versus Michael Bush for $3, I think Bush and Goodman are close enough that you just go with Goodman or with Bush. Yeah. You just save the money, you'll spend it later. But I think the thing you have to keep in mind with all these discussions is intentionally choosing a worse player to save money, you still have to spend that money. And there are a finite number of players who are worth X dollars. So, it's not like there's an unlimited number of players. And you also have to keep in mind the players who aren't kept in any keeper league are going to be more expensive than they would otherwise be. Mm-hmm. Because you're keeping Michael Bush for $3 and he's a $10 player or whatever. There's $7 extra now in the player pool, and everybody's got to have a couple of those. So your $45 players are probably $50 players in the auction, at least. I mean, our Dynasty League, it's a 24-team Dynasty League. There are very few good players available. They're going to go for $60 in that one. If they're truly like first-round players are going to go for $60 or $70 in that league. I think last year I had to get Alex Bregman for $49. So you have to keep in mind that there will always be inflation, which just makes any discount you get on the high dollar players especially even more impactful.
This next one is from Will. Question for the mailbag. You talk a lot about builds for your teams. what are some of the ways you evaluate your builds while you are in a draft or an auction? Are you going on feel? Are you going by numbers? And I think it's a good question, and everybody is different. It comes down to knowing yourself as a player and whether or not you can handle, draft software and things like that while actually drafting, because it is a lot to pay attention to and a lot to manage. We have had, I think, two polar opposites recently here on the podcast. Last week, we did a YouTube-only episode draft software tutorial with Tanner Bell, where he walked us through how to use his draft software and how to track your stats throughout the course of a draft. So that's one way to do it, if you can manage it. And then this week, we had Mike Mager on, who is the auction overall back-to-back champion over at the NFBC. And so maybe surprising to some, surprising to me, he doesn't track his stats throughout the course of an auction. I mean, he's been doing it for so long that he just kind of has a feel and he knows kind of what he needs. And he did say that he has like category targets that he knows of, but he's not actively tracking those projected stats throughout the course of the auction or the draft. He just kind of has a feel. He's been doing it for so long. So there's no right answer. And I think it comes down to you as a player, Chris.
Yeah. And the thing you have to keep in mind when you're tracking your targets for categories in draft is, let's say you're doing that based on a projection system. Well, what projection systems are never going to do is project someone for, like Geraldo Perdomo had 720 plate appearances last season. Projection systems are just never going to project guys for that kind of playing time, even though it does happen. And so your projected numbers, if you're tracking them based on, let's say, ATC projections, they're probably going to be lower than what they actually end up being. Your projected home runs will probably be higher than the actual projections themselves. So part of the problem there is ideally you want to compare your projections to everyone else's projections. Well, that just became 12 times or 11 times as much work as you'd be doing otherwise. So that's always tough. I think it's more on feel. I have gone through periods where I've kept track of my stats throughout the drafts. I don't know how much it really helps. I think you want to be able to say, oh no, my batting average is really bad and I need to make up for that. But, trying to keep track of that through projections as the draft is going, I think it's of limited utility, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I also think that, where was I going to go with this? We were just talking about tracking Euro projections. I do think that pairing players together early on in the draft is something you could do just to kind of build out balance, and whether or not that's, player pairings that make sense together. Aaron Judge and Trey Turner, right? Something like that, where two players that kind of complement each other early in the draft based on the categories that they provide. I think that's one way to look at it. And something else that Mike Mager brought up the other day, which is interesting, is maybe not focusing so much on it in the draft and just getting the best values that you can, and realizing that there are 26 regular season weeks or 27 regular season weeks where you can play the waiver wire and you can do different things. And in the NFBC, you can't make trades, but in a lot of home leagues, you can make trades. So if you have a team that's great in home runs or great in steals, you can trade off of that and try and address other needs. And maybe just getting the best values where you can makes more sense. With the caveat that I think you should pay more attention to batting average, because again, that's harder to make up in season. So pay attention to batting average. But man, if you're just great in home runs or steals throughout the course of the season, you can try and trade off that, or maybe just address it on the waiver wire. This next one is from Ryan. Which team won this trade? Team 1 received Roman Anthony for $7. Team 2 received Jackson Trio for $11, Logan Gilbert for $13, and Leo DeVries for $3. It is a 10-team head-to-head points league, $200 team salary cap. And as much as I love Roman Anthony, Chris, I do think getting Trio, Logan Gilbert, and Leo DeVries is the much better of the two.
Yeah, I mean, $7 Roman Anthony, I guess in a dynasty league, it's slightly different, but is a $7 Roman Anthony that much more of a discount over an $11 Jackson Churia? In a head-to-head points league, it becomes closer, but I still think you'd rather have Churio certainly for 2025 or 2026. So
yeah,
and then you're getting a discounted Logan Gilbert.
Yeah,
I think a $3 Leo DeVries, that's pretty close to not. I guess Dynasty, it goes up every year.
He said minor leaguers go up $1 each year, major leaguers go up $2.
Okay, so let's say he doesn't make his debut this year, so he's a $4 player next year.
He'll be a $5 player in 2 years when he probably is up with the Athletics, I think.
Yeah. I think that's probably fine, but yeah, I think on the whole, getting the 3 players, Roman Anthony's going to have to be like a no doubt first rounder, I think, to justify this one.
And even with that, I mean, Jackson Trio could become a first-round player this year. So,
and Logan Gilbert could be the best pitcher in fantasy this year.
Yeah, so team 2 by a landslide, I would say. This next one is from Bill. I have a random offseason pitcher evaluation question. Whenever a pitcher changes teams or is potentially getting called up to the majors for the first time, the same talking points are reviewed for projecting expectations. For example, the pitcher's track record from where he's been comparatively bounced against the new team's park factors and team defense, the team's new coaching staff, the new team's run support versus prior team. But you almost never hear anything about the other arms and minds in the rotation that he's joining. The guys he'll be sitting next to chatting in the bullpen for the 130 games he's not scheduled to pitch. Shouldn't that be a consideration? They must talk shop, right? Shouldn't that factor for Mackenzie Gore? He is joining, obviously, the Rangers, and they have Jacob deGrom, or someone like Bubba Chandler, who's joining the Pirates, gets to be around Paul Skenes a lot. And there's no way for us to quantify this, Chris. I think there's a good point here, and it's something I've tried to bring up in the past. You just don't know exactly because everybody's different. Even if there's a young pitcher who's joining a staff that has established major leaguers and great pitchers around him, maybe that pitcher doesn't want to learn from another pitcher, or maybe they're shy or timid, or they just like to do their own thing, or they have their own, workout regimen and their own training that they do. I mean, it's so hard without maybe hearing a quote or, hey, reading a story. This pitcher is taking this pitcher under his wing and really helping him with this pitch. And it's so hard for us to know.
Yeah. In theory, there's something here for sure. I definitely want to say that I definitely don't want to say there's nothing here, but I think of the Marlins. I think of the Marlins often. Sandy Alcantara and Yuri Perez are both super tall Dominican starting pitchers. So you would think there's a lot in common there. And I'm sure having Sandy Alcantara while they're both going through the rehab process for Tommy John surgery was very helpful for Yuri Perez. And I think he's talked about that. But then you actually look at Yuri Perez and Sandy Alcantara, they kind of couldn't be any different as pitchers, right? Yuri Perez is all fastballs up in the zone and trying to bury his breakers down. He gives up a lot of fly balls. He gets a lot of strikeouts. He's got great control. Sandy Alcantara has struggled a lot with command at times, although I think at this point he's very good. One of the rare examples of a guy really improving in command. But he's all east-west. It's all low in the strike zone. He's trying to get weak contact. He's trying to get ground balls. So, even though they are both, I think Sandy's 6'5" and Yuri Perez is 6'9", they're both Dominican. They're both throw really hard. So there are a lot of things they have in common. How much has Yuri Perez learned about pitching from Sandy Alcantara? I can't say it's nothing, but they're not very similar pitchers. They go about their craft very differently. On the other end, I think back to when Trevor Bauer joined the Dodgers, and all of a sudden Walker Buehler starts throwing with less velocity, but significantly more spin on his pitches. Whatever the physics of making that happen were, I think we all know, that was, I think, pretty clearly a result of Trevor Bauer getting to that team and telling them to use spider tack, I think is basically the answer. So there's certainly something there. From where we're sitting, I don't know if we can do much more than guess about what the actual impact of any of that stuff would be.
This next one is from Michael. Who gets bumped when Justin Steele returns? Or, as rumor has it, they signed Zach Gallen. I am worried about Cade Horton getting bumped from the rotation. So the answer is life finds a way. Yeah. And these things usually figure themselves out. Edward Cabrera has a lengthy injury history. Cade Horton has a lengthy injury history. And
I think Jameson Tyon's has he had 2 Tommy Johns?
they very easily could go with a 6-man rotation to keep these guys healthy. Shota Imanaga came over from Japan 2 years ago, and they only pitch once per week there. So I think that's something that will work itself out. I mean, the way that it's set up now, if I had to guess,
whoever's not pitching well.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like, I just don't think there's an obvious answer.
It might be Jamison Tyone, but he's also making a lot of money. So.
Yeah, he's making a lot of money. He's a tenured member of the organization. I genuinely think it just comes down to who's pitching well. But look, Cabrera had an elbow sprain last year. He's had a ton of elbow or shoulder injuries in the past. Cade Horton has had both shoulder and elbow injuries, as you mentioned. Matthew Boyd last year was the first time he'd thrown more than 80 innings since 2019. I am not worried about. I am almost never worried about any team having too many pitchers. I think the Cubs will have opportunities no matter who they add.
Mm-hmm. And he has the same question for the Yankees. Also, when all the Yankees injured pitchers return, who gets bumped? I am worried about Ryan Weathers. So Ryan Weathers himself has not been able to stay healthy at all. And if we're being honest, a lot of the Yankees pitchers have had trouble staying healthy. Again, it should figure itself out. It should work its way out. Rodon expected back late April, early May. Cole, late May, early June. But Luis Gil has dealt with a lot of injuries. If I had to guess, and Max Fried and Cam Schlittler are healthy, and Rodon and Garrett Cole are healthy when they return, and Ryan Weathers is pitching well, I think that will be their 5-man rotation. So that could mean Luis Gil's in the bullpen. Will Warren is a spot starter, long relief out of the bullpen. If everyone's healthy, I think it's Cole, Rodon, Fried, Schlittler, Ryan Weathers. But I would almost guarantee by the time both Rodon and Cole are back, that will not be the rotation.
And I'll just say, I think in the long run, Ryan Weathers and Luis Gil are in the bullpen before long anyway. Maybe it's not in 2026. Maybe they still need both of those guys. But I think they both just kind of profile as bullpen arms in the long run.
Yep. Michael also asked about 2 base stealers who stopped running last season. Maikel Garcia had 18 steals through the end of May and was caught stealing 9 times. The rest of the season, he only attempted 5 more steals and was safe every time. Bryce Terang had 17 steals through the end of June and was caught 8 times. The rest of the season, he only had 8 attempts and was safe on 7 of them. Were there any injuries that might have stopped either Maikel Garcia or Bryce Terang from running last season? I haven't seen any injuries, Chris. For the Bryce Terang one, it feels more like his profile just changed and he became more of like not a true slugger, but he hit for more power, and I think there were just less opportunities for him to run. The Maikel Garcia one was a little bit weird. I think, he was hitting in the middle of the lineup and stuff, so maybe there were just like more RBI opportunities and stuff, but I expect Garcia to lead off for the team. I think the steals could come back up a little bit. The Bryce Terang one is a little bit tougher. I think he's fast enough to do it. I think the skill set is there, but I also kind of trust the increase in swing speed and power that we saw last season. So I just don't know that he'll have to run as much, I guess, for the Brewers.
Yeah, I think the way to react to this is not to say, oh no, Maikel Garcia is not going to steal any bases next year, or oh no, Bryce Terang's not going to steal any bases. I think it's just, one, these things tend to come in bunches anyway.
They're so fickle too, steals.
Yeah, steals, like, you don't know how teams are changing the way they scout opposing base runners, right? Like, are teams more worried about Maikel Garcia when he's on the base paths after the first couple of months? It's certainly possible that they're just throwing over more and paying more attention to it. It's certainly possible that there was a change in the Royals' approach for Maikel Garcia, and they said, we've got, that's around when Vinny P started heating up, right? It is like June. Maybe it's just, hey, Vinny P's hot and he's hitting behind you. Maybe we don't want to, take our RBI opportunities off the board for him or something like that. So I think you're looking at the natural range of outcomes for these guys, and that for both of these guys is on the high end. They could be 35 steal guys, maybe more. Bryce Terang stole 54 bases a couple years ago, but the low end is maybe they're in the high teens. I think that's still valuable, but there's ranges of outcomes for every player.
And this last one is from Jeff, and it is a fun one. Happy Groundhog's Day. That groundhog, by the way.
What a jerk.
6 more weeks of winter.
You know what?
Come on, man.
He's only hitting like 390. which is like, that's good for a baseball player. But if you're worse,
we need a new groundhog.
If you're worse at predicting things than a coin flip, I'm not going to take it seriously. You know?
The hitter most likely to break out in 2026 is blank.
Hold on, let me update my
I think everyone's favorite breakout is Ben Rice, but he already kind of broke out. So my answer for this is kind of a cheap one, but it's Roman Anthony.
Yeah, I think Roman Anthony's a good call. I think, yeah, in terms of most likely, I like Roman Anthony. I'm kind of talking myself into Wyatt Langford after doing a little more research lately.
He's good.
Like going 22 and 22 in 135 games while having 4 different oblique injuries. It's pretty impressive. Like, that's a pretty high floor. So I think Wyatt Langford is a very good bet to take a step forward. And then, like, I have, different categories of breakouts on my breakouts 1.0 list. I've got, the guys making the leap from stardom to superstardom, or the guys making the leap from good player to star. And obviously, I think the guys making the leap to stardom, I have a little more faith in. So, like, that's where I have Roman Anthony. I also have bounce back candidates. If you want to count it, like, I certainly think Yordan Alvarez is going to have a much better season in 2026 than he did in 2025. Does that count? Is that cheating? Maybe I'm a cheater. Whatever.
My other answer here, I guess, true breakout. Oh, look, Roman Anthony is one of them, but Sal Stewart. We talk about Sal Stewart a lot, man. It's just what he did last season, what he did in the minors, his ability to make contact, hit the ball hard, good eye at the plate, great ballpark. I think the lineup's going to be pretty good too. I mean, pie in the sky, things work out the way I think they could for Sal Stewart. I mean, we're talking 270, 280 plus, 25 home runs, 10 to 15 steals, really good counting stats. And he's, a top 75 pick this time next year. So that's my other answer here. Most likely to break out, Sal Stewart. We are going to wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning into Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.